Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Autism Story podcast. Today, I have the opportunity to chat with Tahni Cullen. She's the mother of Josiah. They were both featured on the Telepathy Tapes. I am so excited to chat with you today, Tahni. I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and we're going to start from there.
Hi, thanks for having me today. Yes, my name is Tahni Cullen. I am from Minnesota, and my son now, Josiah, is 19 years old, if you can believe it. So we've been in this for a while, and I homeschool him. I care for him. That's most of my job.
Yeah.
And these days I am supporting him in his dreams,
Yeah.
and that's wear a lot of hats doing it. So
Sweet. That's awesome. So, yeah, I want to just start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit of how you got to finding out that he was autistic.
sure. Well, Josiah, everything was pretty normal for the first about 19 months of his life. He was meeting his medical milestones. He was happy. He was sociable. He had some words I had recorded in his little baby book, the words that he had: mama, dada, nana. He had about 40 words. Everything seemed normal. The only thing that was of concern was that he had started walking a little bit later, about 17 months old, by the time he finally took off and walked.
Okay.
And once that happened, we were like, whew, okay, everything's good then. But yeah, it was about, just seemed like it was about a 3-week period that he really just shifted and changed somehow. He stopped responding to his name. He stopped looking at us. He was flipping light switches on, off, like he was mesmerized by it. He would stare up at fans on the ceiling. He would take his cars, turn them upside down, and spin the wheels. It was like I was trying everything to get him under a blanket, to get him to look at me,
Yeah.
and attend to me. And it just seemed like we were just losing him. And it felt like it went very quickly as far as that goes. And he had actually been, he'd been being taken care of by a in-home daycare.
Okay.
And previous to that, she hadn't noticed anything. Obviously, she'd
Mhm.
taken care of kids for many years.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes people will think, well, he's your only child. Maybe you just missed the signs. But honestly, even looking back at pictures, videos, it just seemed like it was the regressive, type of autism. And so we went through about 4 months of therapy and testing. And, we found ourselves after about 3 days of very intense autism type testing. We were around a board table. They put tissues in the middle, which is never a good sign.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
they
goodness.
handed me a packet, and it said autism spectrum disorder on the
Yeah.
outside. And I opened the packet, and I remember very distinctly it saying autism spectrum disorder, no known cause, no known cure, lifelong.
Yeah. And
And
as a new
I just
parent,
felt
that
at that moment like a gavel had come down on my little 2-year-old's life and
yeah.
our life. What was this going to mean for him, for us?
Yeah.
And honestly, as a mother, as a believer in Jesus,
Yes.
the thing that just cried out from my heart was, where is hope then when there is no hope? What
Yeah.
are we supposed to do with this? And so that began our journey
Yeah.
into all of.
It can be really, really hard hearing autism for the first time. And just like you said, they said there was no non-cause, no cure. Like you're new to this and you have nothing. It's like they're just not giving you any hope. I remember
Yeah,
that.
and back then, it was 1 in 150 kids when Josiah was diagnosed. and now I believe it's 1 in 32 or something like
Yeah.
that. So obviously, over the years, it's accelerated a lot. And
Yeah.
yeah, and back then, everything that they said was just the best you could do is get him into 40 hours a week of ABA,
Yeah.
intensive therapy. And so my little 2-year-old basically had to start a full-time job
Yeah.
learning how to
It's
play.
true. It's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they told us when we got our son's diagnosis, ABA, and lots of hours. And in the beginning, you don't really know what's
I
best.
remember the day when I took all of the parenting books and parenting magazines that I had collected
Yeah.
and I just threw them in the trash because I was like, this is not
It's
anything like
not
our
really
life.
bad. Yeah. Yeah.
The manual does not apply.
I always think there is no manual. And the thing that is frustrating is where the doctors who are supposed to have information for us to help us don't really give us much in that early stage of our journey when we really need it.
We had an intro to autism course that we took as parents. It was a
Okay.
4-week course that was offered through the county. And
Okay.
it was extremely depressing. I'll just
Oh,
say that.
that was so
And
cool. I was thinking, wow, you guys had.
no, it's not like that they didn't have good intentions, but it
Oh,
was essentially I walked away thinking everything that they're preparing us for is to cope.
yeah.
And it was they talked a lot about how parents who have children with autism experience what's called chronic sorrow and chronic grief. And I just remember thinking like, man, I prayed over this child every day, even
Yeah.
before he was born. And it says in God's word, Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you.
Yeah.
Plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future.
Yeah.
And I just realized I was like, I turned it's in times like that, I feel like you're either gonna press into God or you're gonna turn away from God because the fire
Yeah.
gets turned up so high. And I
Yes.
decided I was gonna press in, but really what came to me was I could not find any scriptures in the Bible that said anything about coping. It was all about hope.
Yeah.
And so in those early days, I actually created a blog because I felt like I needed an outlet to just share what
Yeah.
I was going through. And I
Mhm.
actually named the blog Hoping, Not Coping. That was
Oh,
the
I
name of
love
the
that.
blog. And that kind of informed the first, number of years, which really helped. And then Josiah hit about 5 years old. And I remember back then they talked about the 5-year window. It was before there was the idea of like neuroplasticity and that you're always, going to be able to create connections with the brain. It was basically like if they're not able to do XYZ by 5 years old, you're kind of,
Oh, I was like,
it's race against the clock. And so early intervention is so important. Well, we had done everything we possibly could. And I remember him being 5 years old, and the place where he was getting therapy brought us in, and they said, you guys have done so much. You've done everything that you possibly can above and beyond. Um, we're going to have to stop working on speech, we think, because he's just not creating words. And we're going to have to go to like the picture exchange system to try to get some communication out of him. And also, we just don't even know what his receptive language is. It just seems like it's a toddler stage, if that. And so it just seemed like there was just another addendum, and we got the psychologist basically said he's low functioning, he'll be nonverbal, he's severe. So then we had that again, and it felt like just another difficulty to wade through.
Yeah.
And it was about that time, not long after, that there were some friends of mine that said, "You have got to see this. You've got to see this documentary that's on HBO. It's called A Mother's Courage." And it was when watching that that I saw that there was this portion where her name is Soma. Um, she is the creator of rapid prompting method, RPM,
Mhm.
was working with this young boy that's in this documentary, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, he looks like my son." You know,
Yeah.
he has the appearance of how my son is acting.
Acting. Yeah.
And maybe he can actually get this where he's able to spell and learn to point to letters. So I was actually able to find somebody that was about 4.5 miles or 4.5 hours away. I mean, and because there was no way we were going to be able to get on a plane,
Yeah.
but thankfully, we were able to take him, and there was like a 4-day camp or something where she was able to teach us the method. I remember going to that camp, and it was like a light bulb came on for me. One of the things that she said was this: "Presume age level intelligence." That completely blew my mind
Yeah.
because we'd been told he probably has the mind of a toddler, he can't really
Yeah.
understand. So even as a mom, and I was in the communication field, and I had kind of stopped talking with him very much, or you're
Yeah.
kind of taught to remove as many words as you possibly can,
Yeah.
so as to say something like touch cookie, get milk.
Yeah.
You lose that intimate connection
Connection.
that you have
Yeah.
when you're talking with a child and you're just getting to know them and you're telling them things, and you don't
Yes.
it doesn't look like they're even listening, right? And so it was like I got this permission almost to she said, he's an auditory learner. I can tell by the way that he stims and things like that. He's listening, he's taking in all sorts of stuff. She said, "You need to really almost talk with him as if he's blind." So, like, when you're walking around and you're taking him to the park or whatever, just kind of keep an ongoing conversation with him. "Oh, look at the trees. The trees have leaves. The leaves have veins on them. Oh, in the fall, there's photosynthesis." And talk about the seasons and just talk about all these things. And that really was helpful for me. And I was seeing there at that first opportunity at that camp, and he was pretty little. He was only 6 years old at that time. But, even in what she was doing at that age, he was showing that he could make choices, that he did have receptive language. And that really excited me because then I felt like I would be able to work with him and that perhaps I could teach him how to spell.
Yes. That's amazing. And so, at what age was that? How old was he at that
So he
point?
was 6 when I first took him to that camp, and then I worked with him at home for about a year, and it was difficult because he would slide out of the chair, and he would just give me the hardest time. And that's one thing I would tell parents is, like, just set yourself, like, you, no matter what, are going to work with your child,
Yeah.
3 times a week, 25 minutes a time.
Hmm.
Even if 15 minutes of it, you're trying to just get them back in the chair, just be consistent and keep at it because it's so important to just keep at it. Well, I
Yeah.
thought I was teaching him how to spell. Um, but, I wasn't quite doing it right. I wasn't quite doing the lessons quite right.
You mean the
Well, I
method?
I thought I was teaching him, like, how to spell, so I would say, "Okay, we would rip the paper in half when "The car is blue. What color is the car? BLUE, or is it RED, red?" And rip the
Hmm.
paper in half, tap on blue, tap on red, and then he might tap red, and then I'd say, "Okay, let's spell red," and I would give him the letter R, and then
Okay.
E, and that's not really how you're supposed to do it. So I
Yeah.
thought that's what I was doing I thought I was doing it correctly. Well, about a year later, we were able to get a refresher course. And she showed me that I wasn't doing it correctly, that you're actually supposed to say the letter after they're
They,
spelling it.
mhm.
And it was at that refresher course that she asked him an open-ended question, what color do you want the car to be? And he spelled his first word independently that wasn't given to him, and it was Brown. And so that
Wow.
like blew my mind. I was like, yes, this is so awesome. And I was
Oh
so
my
excited about
goodness.
that.
Yeah.
But about a month later, we're sitting at the table and I decided to do a lesson with him out of the children's Bible, and it was about when Jesus healed the blind man. And so I read him the lesson, and then I say to him, Josiah, Jesus healed the blind man. What did Jesus do? Did he HEAL heal the blind man, or did he PLAY play with the blind man? Heal or play? Wrote that on a piece of paper. Tap heal or tap play. He chose heal correctly. And I said, okay, let's spell heal. And he presses G, and then he presses O, and I was like, "Go, you're missing it." He goes on to spell his first ever independent sentence, "God is a good gift giver."
Wow. Oh my
And
goodness.
I thought that I was like losing it or something. I'm
Yeah,
like, did I just
I can
crack
imagine.
on a
Oh
gift
my
giver?
goodness.
Josiah, yes, God is a good gift giver, but how do you know that? And he goes on to spell, God is very capable. And
Oh
over the
my.
course of the weekend, he just opened, the floodgates opened up.
No.
And it just so happened that uh, the iPads had really just come out a year before. And he was attracted to the iPads and actually had an app that was the letter board, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all in
Okay.
tile.
Mhm.
And he preferred using that at the time. And the cool thing was, even though it didn't have he wasn't able to do any spaces or punctuation or anything, was
Yeah.
that everything that he wrote was saved. And
Oh, it's
so it was
stayed.
able to be saved and, written out, especially in those early days. And so that was interesting. So I was asking him every possible thing, getting to know my son. What's your favorite
Yeah.
color? What do you like to do? What food do you like best? I mean, we parents who have children that are non-speaking and autistic, you just want to know them, even those
Yeah.
simple things that people take for granted. And so that's what started. And actually, it's interesting because in looking back, I think about those first words, God is a good gift giver,
Yeah.
actually kind of became the thesis statement for our lives. I mean, anytime that things got difficult or hard, or you just wonder, like, what are we going to do? I was
Yeah.
just reminded that, like, I got this miracle, you know, God
Yeah.
is a good gift giver. He's for us. He's not
Mm,
against us. He's working
that is
with us,
so true.
you
Yeah.
know? So that was so just prized for me. And
Yes.
as time went on, though, he continued to write things, and it was like these wisdom words were coming out. Like he wrote, faith is believing for kites to fly when there's no wind in sight.
Wow.
Or he would write, faith is picture it done. I was like,
How profound.
wow,
How
that is
good.
like the best description of faith I've ever heard. Faith is
Faith
picture
is
it done.
picturing done. Wow.
And he was writing things though that I could not quite understand. They were like things of heaven.
Yeah.
And I was trying to decode it. I was trying to figure out, how are you knowing this stuff? One time I asked him, how do you even know how to spell these words? I thought that I had been teaching him how to spell, and we're
How to
talking like
spell.
4 and 5 letter words. And he said, Jesus taught me the order of sounds. And I was like, Jesus gave you hooked on phonics or
Yeah.
what? Well, so it
basically.
was really
Wow.
wild because it's almost like he was learning in a realm outside of where he was
Where
learning. I knew he wasn't learning the sort of things that he was coming out with from me or from anybody at his therapy center, you
yeah.
know? And it's not like he was watching. He really didn't like to watch television till just this year, honestly. He didn't even like ever having the television on.
Wow.
Wow. So it's just it was amazing, and then as time went on, he started writing, like, poetry. He started talking about angels and Jesus and all of these things, and so, we get into that more and more in our book,
Yeah.
but that is what I guess is interesting from the standpoint of the telepathy tapes,
Yeah.
as that came out.
Yeah. So, yeah, now that we're talking about that, um, how, how did you guys get involved with the telepathy tapes?
So, what's interesting is, I've been at this now with my son for about 12 years. And when these sort of kind of extra type of things that he knew about, um, even being able to give what I guess in the Christian circles you would call like words of knowledge to people,
Yes.
he would have prophetic words to
Yeah.
give to people. And in fact, there's a book that came out called Jesus, Josiah, and Me by Max Davis. And I never thought that guy would end up writing a book about this, but he was given all of this um, revelation basically from Josiah, who we
Yeah.
didn't know him. And that's really what's featured on the telepathy tapes.
Yes.
Um, so basically, Josiah, he's been over all these years, he's been very in tune with the spirit.
Mm.
And interestingly, as he got older, he matured more in how he was able to interpret and kind of write about what he was seeing or
Okay.
experiencing. Whereas when he was younger, it was a little bit more raw, and I had to kind of figure out, like,
Decode it
where is
yourself.
this
Yeah.
going, And I also had to really help him understand his giftings.
Okay.
And I really wanted to make sure that, it was under the realm of the protection of God and the Holy Spirit and
Yeah.
Jesus.
Okay.
Because I think that, people are given gifts, I think, kind of like a radio receiver, and you can tune to different channels,
Yes.
given your giftings.
Mhm.
And you can pick up frequencies that are spiritual that may not necessarily be God frequencies. So
Yes.
I just always feel like it's been important for me to make sure that he is, walking in that kind of truth and
Yes.
umbrella of truth. And he's also opened my eyes to so many things about the scriptures and God and Jesus and angels and the Holy Spirit that I didn't realize or know about.
Yeah.
And that has been really interesting, as his mom and as someone
Yeah.
who, loves Jesus.
Yes.
It's really brought us into an adventure in God.
Yeah.
But the way I got involved with telepathy tapes is, we have some friends that got really involved, Houston and Katie, who were on the telepathy tapes.
Okay.
And, you know, really how we even met was when I put out our book, I didn't know anybody else who was having the experiences that we were having. As a parent, you are concerned, like, is he hallucinating? Is it
Yes.
schizophrenia? Is it, I mean, you're going through all the things to try to figure out what in the world is going on here. And then our book came out, and we had gone on some television shows, and that's when I started getting messages from people. Josiah, I had created a Facebook page for Josiah to have as an outlet to share some of his little writings and poetry and things like that. And
Yeah.
people started contacting me there, and they said, "Your story is our story."
Wow.
And it was non-speaking children who had autism. Um, I would always talk with them on the phone too, and it was basically like they were Christians.
Yeah.
They their children were highly spiritually sensitive,
Yeah.
and many were highly prophetic. So over the years, I had collected these people on like a private Facebook page, and we've stayed in touch and we've tried to navigate these things with our children
Yeah.
because a lot of us don't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
The things that are coming out from them, the things that are happening. And just like what the telepathy tapes even mentioned was, um, you can have experiences where like they're seeing angels and, awesome things, but also they can see demonic things too.
Yes.
They
I
can
was gonna say
see
yes.
they can see just they have their eyes open to spiritual things, and that can be
Yeah.
very disturbing for them. It would be
Yes.
disturbing for anybody, right? Um,
Yes.
and so, navigating even that and like the emotional, upheaval and trauma and fear that can happen from simply being non-speaking,
Yeah.
that's something that my son has taught me that over the years, it is very fearful for a child to not be able to
Not be
speak.
able to speak. Wow.
And that was something that he even has said recently is you need to tell the little kids that like what is happening to them, how
Okay.
their brain is working, how their body is working, and tell them everything as you go through because they know what's happening anyway, that it's causing stress and um, upheaval and
Yes.
you're going to doctors and you're going to therapists and things like that. But if we don't take time to actually talk with them and say, I know this might be scary, this is what's going on, that they get afraid, and
Yeah.
fear can really attract
Negative
negative
things.
things,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And so that's where we as parents too, it says in God's word that perfect love casts out all fear. And
Yeah.
so there's also a journey that we go on to try to understand for ourselves and also present to our children what does it mean to to get love
Yeah.
filled in to push out, that
Fear.
fear.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
anyway, over the years, all of these parents would come to me and they were having very similar experiences as what we had had. So
Okay.
by the time the telepathy tapes came out, I've been in contact with people and they've become friends, and we've even had Bible studies for our spellers, as they got
Oh,
older, like
that's
they
sweet.
have
Yeah.
Zoom Bible studies together, and they're just so profound together.
Yeah.
Um, just amazingly encouraging to one another. It's really inspiring to see when they get together and are able to, even online, be
Yeah.
able to share with one another. But,
Yeah.
so yeah, by the time the telepathy tapes came out, Katie in Houston had been our friends, and she had, told Kai, who is the documentary person, more about us. Kai had read the couple of books that are about our story. And my son really didn't experience straight up telepathy as they are presenting it. And I think
Okay.
that the word telepathy can be a little difficult for people to navigate. I know for me, it was not
Yeah.
a word that I liked to have
Um,
used.
I do feel like it takes away from the spiritual aspect from what you're telling me, uh, Josiah's experience is more spiritual, and the word telepathy. So, from what I've heard, other spellers, even on the telepathy tapes, when I was listening to how they would explain their experience, they would not own it. I don't know per se. They would say telepathy, as you might call it. And then they would
Right.
go on to say, I think I remember two people that said it's hard for them to explain their experience in a way that we might be able to contextualize.
Well, and I
So,
think too, whenever you hear about people who have had like near death experiences and
yeah.
have come back, from heaven, many will talk about how it's not like words are exchanged like we exchange them. It's like
Yes.
spirit to spirit
Yes.
communication without
Yes.
moving your mouth. And there's
Yeah.
kind of like an exchange of information that is far more than what the words are able to give. There's just
Yeah.
like a knowing that's kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
transferred.
Just like,
And I
yeah.
think that that is kind of more what can happen. One of the things that Josiah said about it is he said, the mind is under no standing fixed point inside of a person's skull. And so one of the things that he said is that the mind is not housed under the skull. It is housed in the mind field. And so
Wow.
if we can understand that we're not just our
Yeah.
thoughts are not in here, but
Yeah.
they are out here,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is really what science tells us,
Yeah.
right? And thoughts
That's
are
what I was just
things, and
thinking. When you think about
energy and vibration and all of
yes.
that stuff, these realms out here. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing that he said, what was interesting is he said, for them, it's not a mind-blowing thing. For us, we're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so mind-blowing." For them, it's almost like, he likened it unto how birds are able to, fly, south for the winter, where
Okay.
they actually are able to see the pathway to go, right?
Oh, they're not
Like,
just
that
going.
that is their nature to be able to
Okay.
just fly that way. And
Okay.
so the way that they're experiencing things in the spiritual realm, or in the invisible is natural for them.
To them.
So it's
Okay.
actually the path of least resistance for them.
It's easier.
It's easier. So, and probably because their other senses have, not being able to speak and
Yeah.
being quieter and things like that. One of the things Josiah
Being in
mentions is,
control.
even in a classroom of children that are non-speaking, that
Mm.
they're able to communicate with one another through
Yeah.
their thoughts.
Yes.
And so, but where I think it can get dicey is that people might think that then they are not the ones doing the communicating on the boards,
Yeah.
as we're just taking everything from the communication partner,
Yeah.
which is completely inaccurate and not at
Yeah.
all what
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
looks like, what the experience is. If they
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
have abilities to take some fragments from, another person's mind or thoughts, it's certainly not the whole of what they're able to
But they're
communicate.
yes. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that is important for people to understand. It's
Yes.
that, yeah, I just hope that as time goes on, people will really grasp that, to understand that's not what's really happening, and they can get that wrong.
Yeah, they're the naysayers, and you know what? I'm really glad that back when we did this, I didn't even know that there was a controversy.
Yes.
I think part of it is knowing that there's a controversy,
Yeah.
puts all these doubts and
Yeah.
puts
Yep.
all these barriers up. We certainly experienced those barriers as time went along in school,
Yeah.
because here he's spelling and he's able to communicate his thoughts at home, but every step along the way, we would not be able to utilize the letter boards or the just a keyboard at school.
At the school. Yeah.
And
Wow.
so they would say, "Oh, well, we give our assessments." And of course, they would utilize just your regular like AAC devices or
That.
the pictures that you rip off,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the way that they would do it, I would always say to them, but like that's not how he is able to express himself, and I
Yeah.
would show them. I even had a speech and language pathologist one time. uh, I showed her, I said, well, why don't we try it with the board? You
Yeah.
know, why don't you ask him what popsicle color he wants,
Yeah.
and we can kind of work through these things. And so, okay. And so he spells, and I have no hand on him. I'm simply holding the board up, and he
Yeah.
spells ORANGE, orange.
Yeah.
She gives him the orange popsicle. He's plumb happy and glad about that. And we go on throughout the therapy session, and he's spelling all throughout the therapy session.
Yeah.
And she says to me, I see it, but I'm not allowed to believe it.
Wow.
And she said, can he do it with the board on the
On the
table
table.
and you not touching the board? And I was like, okay, help me understand this. I am holding this board, but you see I am completely holding it
Like
100%
stable.
still.
Not even
I am
moving.
I'm not moving it around. In fact, for someone to move around a board, for someone to hit letters,
Yeah,
you would be
that's
like, it
very
would be so
difficult.
obvious to be able to
Yeah.
hit 26 letters.
Yeah.
It would be so
Wow.
obvious. Um, and then I said, I am not touching him in any way. Am I some sort of witch?
Yeah.
Like,
That
how
is
could
putting some
anybody with
making
their
him.
mind cause somebody else to be able to spell out words, sentences, paragraphs, let alone even just touch one thing with their mind?
Yeah.
Like who can do that? Show me who can do that. And so, and then, they might say, well, there must be like some sort of, you know, subtle prompting, that subtle
Yeah.
cueing. But you can't have it all the ways, because that is a hallmark deficit of autism, is that they
Yeah.
don't pick up on cues.
Yeah.
They don't pick up on subtle cues. So how are
Even
they
the
like,
ones even the ones that are able to communicate share that they struggle with picking up cues, like with being social.
yeah,
When they're
and
they're hard,
the
they
facial
have a hard time.
expressions, and
Yeah.
yeah. And so, I think it's very important to understand this deal with the motor planning, the
Yes.
apraxia of the
Mhm.
body, the mouth. Some might call it dyspraxia. That
Yes.
is something that I have seen all throughout Josiah's childhood, is that in all things, he has difficulty making his arms and body do what
Mhm.
his brain tells it. It's a leg.
Yeah.
It needs a little extra prompting verbally,
Yes.
even taking groceries out of the cart and putting them on the belt. Keep going,
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it is with everything. So that's how it is
Mhm.
also with spelling.
Yeah.
And even to this day, I mean, my son is very apraxic in his body, and he continues to need prompting
Prompting.
to do
Yes.
things. But
Yeah.
he's spelling out everything independently, as
Yes.
far as that goes. I still have to hold up the board for him. We're working on the table, and
Yeah.
he's getting better at it. But again, there's so much that goes into it, especially, Josiah talks about how his mind is racing so much farther forward and faster
Yeah.
in what he's thinking he's wanting to say than where
Yeah.
he's actually at spelling it out. So
Yeah.
trying to even get those things to sync up, you got to say, slow
Okay.
down, look
Yeah.
at the board, be precise, stick with
Yeah.
it. There's all of those things. So I always think that people that will have these arguments against spelling, they need to walk even one day in our
In your
shoes.
shoes,
There
yes,
would
in our
be it would
shoes.
be insane to try to fabricate this.
Yeah,
Parents are,
yeah,
like,
um,
giving such a huge sacrifice to help their children be
yeah,
able to
yeah,
spell, and there's no advantage to doing insane
doing
things for
things.
what?
Yeah, so the sad part is that the parents that have children who could benefit from this, from spelling, are listening and believing them. It was so sad today. I saw one of the moms that has a non-speaker, who's I think 13, shared a video from like before when they were starting to do the spelling um, program, but it was a story that was like unique. It was like I think the communication partner was actually doing the spelling. I don't know, but that was a unique case that
Mhm.
was unfortunate, and that does not even have anything to do with this. Anyways, she was backing it up and saying if a child, because they didn't, in the news they took that person and they set her down and they were trying to see if she would point to letters by herself,
Yeah, just
and
any
of course
random
she did.
person, yeah, she's
Yeah.
not going to.
And so they said, if she doesn't know letters, how is she spelling? So she
Yeah.
said, yeah, and that applies to spelling to communicate. If your child does not know letters, they cannot spell. What do you do for that? It's so
Well,
sad. It's
and then they're not taking into account the actual, like, body piece,
yes, yeah, that's what
which
she was
is
forgetting.
everything that
That's the most
spelling to
important piece.
communicate does is train the body to move. And
Yes.
so, you're not even teaching them how to spell, you're just training their body to be able to move, and that makes all the sense in the world. You
Yeah.
know, it's much more like, working with a stroke victim
Yeah.
or someone with Parkinson's, honestly. I think it's much better to look at it that way than someone who is intellectually disabled,
Yeah.
or to think of it as someone who is behaviorally acting.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I think that's the most important piece where people need to always keep in mind it's the brain body disconnect. That is why they are not able to, their body won't do what their brain is telling it to do.
well, for people who, you know, there comes a point, and I am so glad that I am where we are in our journey because my
Yeah.
son is out of school. I
Mhm.
homeschool him,
Yeah.
and then I'm able to put therapies around him.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm so glad that I don't have to deal with the naysayers anymore. I can just
Yes.
let him live his life, and
Yeah.
he just wrote his first, like, song that his music therapist and spelling coach turned into, like, an AI song. It sang his
Wow.
lyrics. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
he's an entrepreneur with another
Yes.
speller. He's having friends that they're getting together in socials and social opportunities to spell together. You
Yeah.
know, the fact that schools and, uh, uh, ASHA and whoever wants to put these parameters and say that this isn't real, that they're doing that, they are really suppressing the
Yes.
the the quality of life
For
for
this.
these children and adults, and
Yes.
I'm just glad that we're not even having to be under it anymore. There
To
was
do
such a
that.
freedom that came with that,
Yeah.
but I do deeply feel bad that it's still a reality after all these years that
Yeah.
people have to struggle to be able to get this for their kids, and in fact, they can't if they're getting it on the side for their kids, they're really not being able to tell their teachers about it.
Yeah.
Um, and
We're
they're not
going
getting
through
support, you
that.
know?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
very difficult, but I would say please continue to press into this. I I would say if anybody out there in non-speaking autism land can come up with being able to show a more efficacious way to get them to communicate, let's see it.
Be it. Yeah, bring it
Now
on.
we have thousands that are communicating in this way.
Yes.
There's millions that need to, but at
Yes.
least we have thousands that are. Show me thousands and thousands of non-speaking autistic children that are whizzes on an AAC device with pictures.
Yeah.
Show me them. If you have a better program, let's see it.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, what changes did you see in Josiah from how his life was before he started spelling and after he started to be able to communicate?
So, he was pretty young when he started
Hmm.
compared to a lot of people. I mean, we know quite a few that their children didn't start spelling till they were 19, 21. you
Yeah.
know. So I look back and I'm so thankful that we
Yeah.
had all those years where he was able to communicate, because I think that he would have become very self-injurious.
Yeah.
He had a tendency at times to self-injure and to get frustrated.
Okay.
I think it would have been far more, um, to be able for him to express his thoughts and even his needs, but also his dreams and what
Yes.
is his personality,
Yes.
has made a huge difference for him in just the way that he is able to, wanting to be with others,
Yes.
wanting to connect with other people.
Yeah.
He is far more in his mind like a typical child
Hmm.
than not. And I think being able to see that and know that was very helpful for me as a parent, because then I was able to, um, speak to him at
Yeah.
his age level. I was able to read to him and educate him even outside of, special ed school times,
Yeah.
with interesting things that fed his mind, going places, being able to go places, even at times over the years when his body has been, dysregulated, or we've had, issues. We've definitely had our issues.
Yeah.
The fact that he could communicate has helped so much to get us over those difficult humps and be able to, engage in public, going to
Yeah.
stores, museums, and, being out in the public and, doing a lot of things. So we really benefit every moment of every day, with it. Now that I homeschool him and have since the pandemic,
Yeah.
he's communicating all the time. It's not a matter of, oh, we have,
To
a
sit down
designated
together.
time every single day that he just does a lesson.
Yeah.
We're communicating all the time,
Wow.
so that is a huge thing, and I think that that is what people should want to have, is
Yeah.
communication all day. What kind of snack do you want?
Yeah.
These can be things, if people are starting to use spelling, is that they can be practicing with their children on just those very simple things.
Yeah.
What kind of snack do you want? What t-shirt do you prefer?
Yeah.
Talking about favorites, talking about what movie you would like to watch, all of
Yeah.
those things. Being able to just have conversations,
Conversations.
and get to know one another.
Yeah, that's that you just reminded me of something that I wanted you to share that you shared with me that I thought was really helpful for me. So for parents that are still practicing with their kids that have not reached that open, their kids are not yet open. I like what you shared about doing a mommy and me diary. Can you please talk about that?
Yes. Yeah. So, there are times that I think that I know I've noticed sometimes my son can get like overloaded, or where there's almost too much input, or they can kind of shut down at times.
Yeah.
And so they might stop communicating for a while, or you might go through a period of illness or something like that. And
Mhm.
so, like, to get things going again, um, I find that it's an easy way to either get a child open or get one that kind of was open and then stopped communicating and then you want to jumpstart again
Okay.
is I got a mommy and me or mommy and son. It's a back and forth, yeah, journal. And
Mhm.
basically, it's just prompts where it's like, my favorite memory of childhood is this. And then you can say, what's yours? It can be
Yeah.
something as simple as, I like this kind of food, pizza. Your
Mhm.
favorite kind of food is what? And so one of the things that we love to talk about is ourselves, right?
Yes.
So a lot of times with things like spelling to communicate, they have wonderful ways of doing the lessons and there are, lessons. But I
Yes.
think in that we also need to remember that children like to know and be known.
Yes.
What can we do to actually have a relationship and to
Yeah.
communicate back and forth about just conversations? Another
Yes.
thing that I've liked to do over the years is we get Mad Libs. And so, you know what I'm talking about, where you can
No,
fill
I
in,
don't.
like, they're called Mad Libs. And it's
Okay.
like, oh, what's a adjective or what's a color or whatever. And you just take them down and then you fill in this kind of funny story. Um,
Okay.
and so it's just a fun family game to do,
Okay.
where it can
Okay.
again get them spelling one word at a time,
Yeah.
and
That's
engage as a family.
Yeah, I think that's really, really helpful. I mean, I thought that was I'm gonna use that, and I know there's a lot of other families that might be going through that, that could really benefit from that example. I really thought that was, really helpful. Thank you. Another thing that I wanted to maybe ask you is, I mean, we talked about misconceptions. You kind of touched on those, but are there things that you've heard Josiah share that he would like the world to know about himself? Just anything that you can remember that he's said himself.
Sure. I think a big thing is with our children, I've just found that especially after puberty, when they hit puberty and you're really getting into the high school years and things like that, they really need a lot of self-esteem
Yeah,
building opportunities because they're recognizing that they're different from their
yeah,
peers, and yet inside they are very
no,
much the
yeah,
same. I think that it's so important to realize that they are so much more like everybody else than different. They might
okay,
think a little bit differently, they
yeah,
might come at things from a little bit of a different angle, but they
yeah,
feel, they feel the emotions that everybody feels.
yeah,
They have dreams and desires and interests just like everybody else has. And I think that that's something that has he's shared a lot about. The other thing is that I didn't even realize it at the time, but it really hurt him to be in a special ed situation where I knew and we knew, everybody knew he could spell, but
yeah,
he wasn't allowed to spell. In fact, I didn't even realize until he was older that he didn't know that I was advocating for him all along.
yeah,
So I think that he didn't know that that we were trying,
yeah,
that we
yeah,
were trying to get him. So to be in a situation where he said, "I knew the answers and I couldn't tell anybody."
wow,
Imagine that. Imagine thinking about how when you were a child and there were parent-teacher conferences and how nervous you were, like, you hope that your teacher's gonna tell your parents something good about you, or
good,
what are they gonna say? Imagine being our children who can't speak, and every single day, the parent and teacher meeting happens, and it's
Yes.
the rundown of everything that they didn't get
I
done, that
couldn't
they didn't
do.
do, that they couldn't do. They're listening to that. That's going into them.
Yeah.
They're hearing that. They get very, very, very down on themselves. And that was something that I really had to swallow that pill really
Yeah.
hard. I didn't
Feeling it right now.
realize just how much that affected my son.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like, if you're looking at a bucket, you got to realize their buckets have holes in them. And we have got to fill those buckets up with far much more
Mm,
about their strengths and about their virtues and about their abilities and all that stuff, because it's going to naturally leak out
yeah.
faster
Mhm.
just because of the nature of it. I don't know that any of them will escape without trauma.
Yeah.
It is a traumatic thing
Absolutely.
to not be able to speak. It is a traumatic thing for people not to know that you're smart. It is a
Yes.
traumatic thing to be in special ed, and you look and you can see all the students that have a whole different life than you, and you're not allowed to go to the games. You're not doing the things that everybody else is doing. I think we
Mhm.
have to do something about that. And as Josiah got older, he is advocating more, like even on his Facebook page just recently, he's talking about like how to help the little kids because
Wow.
he's remembering being a little kid.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what I would say. And the other thing is, these guys are very, instead of autism, people think that autism is like they have very little empathy or they're
Yeah.
very self-focused. I don't know about the whole spectrum of autism, but when it comes to this nonverbal autism and the way that these guys present, and now I've met many, many, many of them with this
Yeah.
profile,
Mhm.
they are very empathetic. They
Yes.
can pick up on other people's emotions
Yeah.
more than most people, not
Yeah.
less. So I think that that's really important, that, they pick up our joys, they pick up
Yeah.
our anxieties.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are listening and they are there. And so that puts a lot on us to be able to manage ourselves.
Yeah.
It can be difficult, and, don't be too hard on yourself by any means. As a parent, it's very difficult to go on this journey. But I
Yeah.
think that if I was able to go back and talk to, a young me,
Yeah.
I would I would say, just be aware that he's listening and he's taking it all in. So make sure that you're careful with his
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And we're just now learning about a lot of these things after listening to the telepathy tapes and listening to, I've been meeting a lot of families now after that. And yeah, I hear a lot of that. And me and my husband were learning. And we're right now navigating. Our son has been playing a very sad song. That's the only thing he's playing around the house. So I feel like he's trying to tell us something, tell me something. He's
Yeah.
sad, and he's so deeply sad. His sadness is very deep. That's how I feel. That's what I feel. And so um, yeah, it brings out a lot of guilt, wondering if he's sad because of things we might have done, decisions we've made. He is in school right now. I did homeschool him last year. So, all those things, it's really hard to, it's just tough to navigate. But it's good
Well, and
to,
continue to just validate him. Any child who is that age, they're going to have sad days and they're going
yeah,
to feel sad. And so if we can let them have that and then
yeah,
be able to kind of redirect, and even when they aren't able to tell us everything, even being able to say something like, I realize that you're sad. I can imagine if I wasn't able to tell my mom and dad this, that, or the other thing, that
Yeah.
I would be sad too. I remember being your age. And you know what? I'm going to do everything I can to help you. And, just continuing to have those heart to hearts like you would any other child, even if it doesn't look like they are taking it in, they are.
Yeah.
And that's something, just to be able to know that in your mind,
Yeah.
that what you're seeing on their face is not the whole picture.
Yeah. That's
Just
true.
imagine they are listening, they are giving you the input back that you're used to getting,
Yeah.
um, and
Vivid.
just keep being yourself. And they know your love. They know that
Yeah.
you're loving them.
Yeah. I did do that with him this morning, and I want to keep doing that so he knows for sure. So, what advice would you give to parents that are thinking about doing RPM or spelling with their children that maybe might be on the fence, or they're just, they're not sure? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so probably the first step that I would say is watch the movie Spellers on YouTube. It's
Mhm.
free now to watch.
Yeah.
That will at least give a nice overview of what it is. They do a
Yes.
good job at that. I would say I have some understanding of rapid prompting method, spelling to communicate, and the spellers method. Those are the three kind of methods that are all a little bit similar. They're kind of in the same family as one another.
Hmm.
Rapid prompting method is what we started with, but there aren't a lot of practitioners in that. There are a lot more with spelling to communicate. And then also the spellers method, I was able to take a parents course online through the spellers method,
Okay.
which was about a 9 or 10 week online course.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, where you can work with your speller, even though you're not getting certified as a practitioner, it helps to help you work with your speller. I think one
Okay.
of the things that can be a pitfall is that people will get their child with a practitioner, and then it's like, for whatever reason, they aren't able to make the transition to, like, also spelling and practicing
Um,
with them.
yeah.
So it's very important to make it so that your child is not only just going to a practitioner to spell once a week
Okay.
or once a month or whatever, but that
Okay.
you're learning how to do it and you're doing it at home regularly. Don't fall into the trap of not doing it at home regularly.
Yeah.
Now, if people do not have the means or are not able to get to a practitioner,
Hmm.
I do notice that there is a free online kind of tutorial that
Yeah.
you can go to. I think it's called
Yeah. I
communicationforall.org
know.
or something like
Mhm.
that. It's not the number one preferred way to do it, but if you're in a place where you just can't get your child there, that's at least a place to start, and you can
Yes.
start getting your
And to get
child to
them
point to
going.
letters,
Hmm.
and you can learn a little bit on how to, begin. If we can
Yes.
get these children to begin at a
That's the
young
start.
age pointing
Mhm.
to letters,
Yeah.
they're just gonna pick it up very quickly.
Yes, absolutely. My son started at 4, so I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's helpful.
fantastic.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much for
Yes,
your
thank you.
sharing your story and your testimony. Your story is very inspiring. I know it's going to help so many out there, and for sharing all the ideas, the tips, and the advice for families. I'm very thankful for your
Thank
willingness to
you.
do this.
Thank you. And if people wanna hear more about our story, Josiah's Fire is the name of the book. It can be found on Amazon. There's another book called Jesus, Josiah, and Me by Max Davis. And also Josiah's Fire Facebook page is where Josiah will put his writings
Yeah.
on the regular. So
Right.
we'll
Yeah,
have to
I'm
keep in
going to
touch.
be linking all of those on this video, and anything else that you shared, and all the links for the spellers.
Great.
And yeah. All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Amazing.
Wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Please check the description below for links to Tahni and Josiah's book and more.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can get notified whenever I post new episodes. I would love to hear what you thought about today's episode in the comments below. Until next time.